right now in America, the only people that matter are the few on top. It's the reason why the Epstein list hasn't been released, or all those, or that's why nobody's been prosecuted from the Epstein list, right? Because there's a tiered system, and we are basically the livestock. They extract wealth from us, from our labor, from the things that we buy, and they hoard it like an old-fashioned dragon in some fucking fairy tale. So capitalism, when it's controlled, can be a very positive thing, but unbound, it ends up where we're at right now, right? And what kind of world would you rather live in? One where things are in balance with each other, where people are making enough money to live, people are getting health care, the economy is humming along at a certain pace, not this extraordinary pace, right? Where you get to make millions in bonuses because you cut jobs. So, it's at some point, and it's starting to show, right, that all of this is gonna crumble. And then we'll have to do some of these things. And it'll be reconstruction, and it'll be great. And then enough people will forget how shitty all this was, and they'll start this shit up again. So, yeah, maximizing profit is predominantly at the root of evil.
Okay, so I would give you evidence to suggest otherwise, and it's right below your nose. It's called Clubhouse. Clownhouse here is not a ruthless maximizer of profit. Their gold coin exchange system is worthless. The data that they sell to third-party brokers primarily gets bought by the federal government. That's the end-all user of all these stupid conversations.
You don't have any.
I do. I have proof of that and evidence. It's in a Wired article. I read it a couple of years ago. I'd be happy to Google that for you. And so I'm just saying that. Yeah, great. So what I'm saying is working on how not to suck. Join me in this pursuit. I do want to pursue that. I don't want to suck. And I got to tell you, as somebody who's run for office 2 times, going on a third campaign, I want to represent the people. And I want them to accept me as their better leader than all the other choices. And I do think Donald Trump is and was a much better choice than Kamala Harris in terms of executive leadership, efficiency, common sense. A lot of people really, really hate hearing that. But I think Donald Trump.
What are the efficiencies that we gained under Donald Trump?
So let me finish my statement here before I answer your question, Romero. I'm reading Ayn Rand, The Virtue of Selfishness, and it deals with ethics. And so, one topic also, other than maximization of profits is immigrant communities, immigrant rights. And I thought today, I was like, I think our economy is actually being hurt by running out illegals, deporting them back out, because these are hardworking men that we need to basically build a country. Then I thought to myself, no, that's crazy. And I thought about what Israel and Palestine, does, and how they give work visas to come in and to build, and they make good money. And there is that like poverty exchange system between the primary currency and outside individuals. You could call that apartheid, but then I said, no, we need very strict laws, because the strictness of the law, it gives us a control. If we want more people to come in to do these projects, there's a lot of people out there that would gladly fly in from other countries to work these jobs. And so we can control our economy. But I would say if we were to discuss economic philosophy, it's the same principle of how do you run a business? And you have to run it at a profit. But Romero, your maximization of profit theory can only exist with the Federal Reserve as the backdrop, because whenever there's a fuck up, you can expand the currency supply and just and glaze it over. But at a casino, you can't do that. They have a cutoff limit with bets, and so that gives the casino that actual edge over the player. But because of our civilization, which a lot of people here think it's going to fail or there's going to be another bloody civil war. I'm actually very optimistic and not pessimistic about that. And so I don't know, those are my thoughts and opinions.
So you're so steeped in colonialism in the system that you can't even see it. Right? The only way we get cheaper labor from other countries is because we cap them at the knee. We deliberately keep them down. Right? And you're right that we shouldn't be doing these mass deportations because it actually does hurt the economy. These are less consumers that the United States have to keep the machine going. And so again, I'm going to ask you, what are the efficiencies that we gained under Donald Trump?
No, I'm just saying, if we were doing the
I'm going to suck less today by leaving this room because I just can't stand listening to John Kitover on. It's so complicated.
Thank you, Hero. Thank you. That's when I really love my experience here, is when people say, you don't know John Kitover, or I hate John Kitover. That's when I love my experience here. Thank you.
I know. You suck.
Well, I just want to answer Romero's question. Hello? Thank you very little. I'll put it in the complaint file. Let me go to the other office and get the complaint file real quick so I can put this note and timestamp on. Romero, I'm just saying. You're not a serious. Okay. My mere existence is a stain on reality for you. I apologize, but I'm trying to respect you and not suck today. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, never mind. I won't answer your question. Just your question, I can't answer it. Apparently, you want me to answer it? Yes or no? Hello? Hello? I'm just saying, from a job interview perspective, if I were to interview Kamala or Donald to come in to run a company, I would choose Donald 9 out of 10 times.
You see how he's not answering my question? He's pivoted.
No, that's how I'm answering your question, from a job interview perspective. You just don't like my response. You don't like what I'm saying. And John...
I literally stopped talking. I literally stopped talking so you had all the real estate to talk. But what are you doing? Pivoting.
It's not a pivot. And John, I want to bring up, you claim there's going to be a bloody civil war, John. That's your own sick imagination. I hate to break the bad news to you. We've already fought a civil war. There won't be some blood spilling that you think that you got to arm up for to fight these maggots. Hello?
Shut the fuck up for a moment and let me. I have to fuck with that, okay? Before you start mouthing off, start being an asshole.
John,
just
really
let
quick.
me say a few things.
Really quick, John, before you say anything. You know what he's doing, right? He's streaming this on YouTube.
We got him again! I get him again! We keep getting them! We keep getting them!
Worthwhile product.
Woo!
We know and understand how that works, and the whole point is the only people that actually listen to these streams are us when we go in to see.
Find out if I'm on his live stream.
Always explained it, but let's not go there. My only point was just to.
Sorry for existing, everybody. I do want to be better today, so I just want to say sorry for existing.
So now you're going to end up with the room that you want.
Listen, gentlemen, I would just point out that I don't use profanity, first of all, and John uses a lot of profanity. I don't use profanity, and I just got to say, I talked to my dad once, and he said, John, you're using an awful lot of profanity. I said, oh, you're right. I got to be more aware of that. And I don't think John is very aware of that. And if you're trying to make your case using profanity and talking about blood spilling and warfare against your fellow Americans, like, I don't do that. That's a John problem, not a John Kitover problem. Hello? That's a John Malencrop problem.
There's John. Oh, John keeps jumping in for a half second. He's like, wait, let me just see if the coast is clear. Maybe just scroll all of the better options that don't suck as much. That would be understandable.
Until people come here and what?
You lost your audience.
I jump from room to room. I'm trying to read a book here. I can't get anybody to read a book anymore. I was saying that I think I'm the last man alive who actually can read a book, and I can prove it to you. I go all around. Nobody's reading nothing. Everybody's just talking like birds in a tree. I haven't heard anybody say anything new in years. Hello? I did buy some DVDs on mathematics, professors, lectures, and it's a syllabus, and they go through all, I haven't actually popped it in the TV yet to watch it, but I'm really interested in watching hours and hours of lectures on mathematics on these DVDs that are professionally organized and put together. I mean, I know I could go on YouTube and watch that stuff, but I'm curious to see how they put mathematics on a DVD for like movie viewer, consumption.
I heard the last 25 seconds of that. I popped out of the app for a second. I probably appear to be in the room when I do it. Whatever my phone's issue is, I can't hear after like 5 or 10 seconds. I missed the beginning. What is the DVD math thing? Or did you say what it was called? Or
I got it in another room. Let me just go grab it.
That's not the way it is in a capitalist system, right?
that's the way it was.
And it's like, so, but what does that mean? Like, what is that? What industries and what activities are being done to increase and maximize
It would be
profit?
the maximum. It would be the limit. It would be the end goal that you'd want to do if you wanted to take it to the threshold. And if capitalism's end goal is maximizing profit, it doesn't need to be slavery per se, but slavery is what we used, right? And then the next best thing would be indentured servitude, immigrants paid below the fray, right? And all these things follow. Robots that can replace humans. Whatever you want to call the magic word. Is slavery just a hot button word for you, or does the concept not
No,
make
because I
sense?
think they're opposite. I think capitalism is the opposite of slavery. So I'm not sure how you or I think Romero is the one who made the claim when I came in here.
But I certainly follow the argument. I mean, slavery is not the opposite of capitalism. Slavery is just something that you do to people. But capitalism is a system that has a lot of moving parts. Ideally, it doesn't have slaves in it, right? But I think he's trying to illustrate the point that if your goal is the stated goal of like every company in the United States is to maximize shareholder wealth, it certainly would be a benefit to you to pay your employees as little as possible, right? To have the average employee making as little as possible. It seems to be what happens in a lot of oligopolies and so forth. You have CEOs making ridiculous amounts of pay, though, then you have the average worker making 300 times the difference and so forth. I just think that minimizing your employee pay, I don't agree that it makes the most sense, but it seems to be the goal of a lot of companies. At least they act that way.
There was
that ratio getting
a private equity firm just recently sold a firm that manufactures garage doors, and they rewarded every employee with a check for like $125K. They didn't have to do that. They did that out of their own goodwill and the benefits that they got from that transaction. And a lot of it deals with the leader of the organization. Like, how much does that leader really need? And how proprietary is the product or service that they're offering? There's so much that goes into this conversation. And the last thing I'll say is about the philosophy of the now, which is that it is a compression of the past and the future, not just the past. That's maybe proprietary and ridiculous, but my point is it's 2026. And when people bring up genocide, apartheid, colonial settler domination of the indigenous, the enslaved, Jim Crow, etc. To me, that's history hypnosis, and they're really bringing us up to the now. But in the now, if you believe that's all there is and all there ever will be, none of that is happening right now. And to me, philosophically, that negates their history hypnosis. And therefore, we should focus on priorities instead of the history. I just don't see why people are so obsessive compulsive about the history hypnosis to justify, an anti-capitalist or anti-optimization situation, because profit maximization is optimization. I've worked in digital marketing all these years. What do you think all these optimizers are doing? They're trying to optimize their ROI. So what is the problem with that?
Manufacturing to the countries of the lowest capital costs, right? Which usually is the metaphorical equivalent of slave labor, right?
Let me ask you this. So, Pro, in the history of the human race, we've gone through various types of economy. We started out, and correct me if I'm wrong or you want to dispute this, but we started out hunter-gatherer. We moved to agrarian. We then moved to feudalism. We then moved to mercantilism. And then we moved to market-based economies. Would you agree with that? Pro, would you agree with that, the evolution of...
I'm getting ready to walk my dog here, but I'm listening if I don't answer right away.
Okay, so what I'm asking is, I think what happens is we get in the weeds about the minutia, about this CEO or that company or, this pay scale or something like that. But I think what Romero, at least, I'm not sure of your thoughts on this, but just that comment that slavery or capitalism is built on slavery just demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of market-based economies. So, I'll ask, what do you think was the catalyst?
Inside conservative circles was really high. People took him really serious. Like, politicians and stuff. So they're really, as much as Nick Fuentes wants to think that everyone's targeting him, no one's really concerned about Nick Fuentes because, it's just a Hispanic guy in Chicago who's, doesn't really like to go out, doesn't really like to get public people going. Like Charlie Kirk would go to all these park campuses, get thousands of kids out, talking. And I think that they realized that, if he could have created a movement, and even, and I know that he said no, he was never going to run for president, but he said he one time said if he ever felt like he needed to, he would. And it's like, well, seems like, I think that they really were like, we're going to group this kid to be on ours to be a Zionist, and then when he became not a Zionist, they're like, well, we got to get rid of this guy because he has way too much influence. So that's what I think about Charlie Kirk. I think that he was psyoped and he was honeypotted and he, I don't think he, and he was a Zionist because he, was honeypotted by his wife, who was a CIA, Mossad, weird woman who, but I think that because of, he probably met her and was like, hey, I believe in a traditional woman. I want you to be with our kids. I don't want you to be working. And she took that. She took that serious, and she was like, okay, I'm going to do whatever you say, because she was required to do so. And look at it. Look at the second that he dies, what she changes her whole persona. Her persona becomes a boss lady. Doesn't become.
That's right.
So it's almost like, yeah, she's playing an act.
Just giving the OnlyFans ideology. Yeah,
that's right.
That's right. Liturgies and shit, fucking as in a single woman hugging a man that really wants the man. Full body lockdown as a fucking stand-up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with J.D. Vance. Mm-hmm. And then she's being embraced as if she saved the nation, or she's a freaking second coming of Michael Jackson or something. It's like with all the fucking fireworks. Like what the fuck? It's almost like a humiliation ritual.
You couldn't take the OnlyFans out of her. What can I say?
That's right.
So yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think all these things, like, you know, and I said this guys earlier, Rabbi Loving Coco. I said that I think that aliens, Iran, COVID 2.0, all of these things, like, they are now Iran. I don't think is a full distraction. I think actually Iran takes place because of Epstein. Like, I think that the reason why the United States is involved with Iran is because, you know, Epstein is a blackmail technique that's used against our politicians to continue to do Israel's bidding. But I think that aliens, COVID, all this stuff is a distraction because these are pedophiles who ate babies, and they want us to forget that they're pedophiles who ate babies in a just world, a world that is a God-fearing world. These people would have been killed, would have been hung in the street for their crimes against humanity. We did worse to the Nazis during the Nuremberg trials, and they never ate babies. They never ate them. Like, you got to think about this. We treated the women who were married to SS soldiers, to SS officers, worse. We shaved their heads. We stripped them naked in the street of Berlin. We allowed soldiers from the Russian and the Allied forces to rape them. We killed them, millions of them, through starvation, post-World War II. We've treated people who were just married to individuals that we believe committed horrendous crimes worse than we've even treated individuals who've committed the crimes themselves. We treated the loved ones of those individuals worse than we're treating the ones that committed. Like, I truly think that these are all signs for us to forget that these people ate babies. They kidnapped your babies, had sex with your babies, and then ate them.
You know about this Mexican model that once came out of a room screaming about...
Yes, a hospital, yes.
Say that again?
Yeah, she was coming out of a hospital. It was right after an award show. And they sent her to the hospital because at the award, I remember this whole story, at the award show, it's a Mexican TV award show, it was a TV actress and singer. And she went to the hospital because they said they had a mental breakdown at the award show, yelling about babies and stuff. And then she comes out of the hospital.
Gabriela Rico Jimenez is her name.
Yes.
Rico.
Yes, Rico. And she comes out of the hospital, guys, and she's yelling. She's like, they're eating babies. I went to a party. They ate a real person. They ate him in front of me. I don't know what to do about it. She's freaking out. And you watch as nurses take her back into the hospital to never be seen again.
You don't know
Yeah,
about this, Rico?
You didn't know about this, Rico?
No, I've seen
Hello?
it. You can talk about Rico. I've seen the video. That's right.
But did they kill her? Is she alive?
We don't know. We don't know.
Fucking sad, man.
Let me share the link for y'all, and you can be like, what the fuck is he talking
No,
about?
myself, I just never followed up if she was alive or not. I didn't think about it.
No, she's not.
So if you're a skilled engineer, then that took you some amount of time to become educated, to practice your craft, to do enough repetitions.
She's not.
Oh, 100%. Like, this is not like,
Keegan,
Can you take out Kitover?
Keegan, I love how at the end of that you said never to be seen again. Very dramatic ending there, Keegan. Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I saw that video, and how do you know that she's not just like mentally ill and schizophrenic and crazy? And
when you say mentally ill, you're like referring to yourself, like that level, or like is it below or above?
I don't know. You tell me, how does projection work, Ludwig?
How does projection work?
Yeah.
But you guys know, he's the A9 as well, which is probably easier to record. But
You say you wanted to direct?
you notice that he will come on stage and he'll just disrupt. He won't engage with the topic. He's here to disrupt.
We know that.
It is a very interesting.
It's more fun when you entertain it. When he thinks, "I got you." When
Yeah. I believe that, like, if I ever was convinced there was paid agents to be on this app, John Kitover is a paid agent to be on this app. If there were any.
My friends were talking about that. We said the same thing for him as well. There's another one I'm not going to mention because he's recording, but there's one other person, and I'm around a lot, and I think he's an agent.
He has one chromosome and 2 brain cells. You expect some sort of.
Maybe he has an extra chromosome. Wouldn't that make him Down? Isn't Down syndrome an extra chromosome?
I'm not sure.
Which, what's another thing is really interesting is we used to, abortion used to be very, it used to not be legal. Used to, even if it was legal, it wasn't widespread. We never saw a lot of Down syndrome children. We're seeing an uptick, Down syndrome children being born. We're seeing an uptick on Down syndrome children being born in the United States. And again, if anyone wants to know, you can find out if your child will have Down syndrome at around, like, I think it's like 14 weeks or 12 weeks, maybe. I forget what week we found where they do a Down syndrome test and they find out whether or not your baby will have an extra chromosome or I think
Equilibrium for the average worker. The CEO has more talents, has done a lot more things that are worth more money, and has to show different sort of proficiencies than someone down below, and they both make a market salary. The market salary for CEOs happens to be a lot higher than the market salary for somebody sweeping the floors in a McDonald's. This is what it is. There's a law of supply and there's a law of demand. There isn't a law of supply and demand, as everyone gets it wrong. Those two will come together and it will say, well, okay, if there's not enough CEOs, well then the salary for CEOs will go up until there's enough CEOs. And then if you're a company and you're not paying your CEO a market wage, well, he's just going to jump ship to some other company. So I would say that the same rule applies. Capitalism works at the top as it will work at the bottom. The fact that they make 35x or 80x or whatever the difference is just the difference in what the market is rewarding for the top versus what the market is rewarding at the bottom.
I would add to that, the reason the disparity has grown exponentially in the past, 10, 20 years is because of globalism. In the past, most companies were local, or maybe at most national. But now, with logistics, supply chains, the internet, the global reach and global access to overseas markets has just exploded. So now, a company that used to be dealing with, local customers within an hour's drive or so, can now reach millions, hundreds of millions of customers around the world. So the global reach has increased. The global revenue, which has increased, the competition. So the number of CEOs who are capable of operating at a strategic or global level is extremely fierce and extremely rare. So if I'm a company, if I'm on a board and I want to find, an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or some rarefied person capable of operating at that level and creating a profit on a global level, then I'm going to pay that person the top dollar because the alternative is my competitor gets it. And now, we are outperformed and we may go under.
Any Illinois juvenile detention. The best example of what you're talking about, in New York City a few weeks ago, the city council a while ago put into place that restaurant service workers would have to make X dollars, and X was greater than the prevailing wage rate. The thinking was, well, similar thing happened in California, where restaurants are closing. They're like, well, that's just not enough. So I can't remember what X was. I think it was $20 versus say $15 or $16. Well, guess what? Some restaurants are doing now. They have a screen where you walk up and you place your order. A person in the Philippines is taking your order, pushing a couple keystrokes. It's going to a back office system in the other side of the restaurant. They just now eliminated that position of the person taking the order. Why? Because they artificially increased the cost, above which companies have said, we can't afford to do that. There's a cheaper solution. So when you artificially increase the cost of labor through government intervention, things like this happen, and you end up messing with the law of supply and the law of demand. And they're very sweet when they're left along their own. They fall apart when you put these artificial constraints on it. So now you can order your
production, and it's been fun. I am getting my production on the bag together. Yeah, that's what you guys are. I'm just getting my bag together to go out the house. Sorry, I'm running up and downstairs, running late to get my son. But yeah, these would be a fun room to talk. I just think whenever you're reducing all these complex social political phenomena into like this one market force idea, like you got it all covered and just call it globalization, it feels like a little too clean to me. Like, you got nothing to see here, just keep it moving. That's just how it works. It's all just naturalization. You're treating the outcome like hi puppy, hi. Like the weather. I just walked my dog. It's like globalization happens, the CEO pay just naturally rises up to just what we got to do. But the pay systems that we have, they're designed by people, boards, laws, taxes, the incentives, the stupid things that we vote for all the time without thinking, right? Stock markets, whatever the power structures are. I mean, you're right about some of the stuff. I'm not saying you're not right about some of the stuff. I mean, globalization clearly is part of this equation. I'm not naive enough to think that isn't it. But
Pro, I'd like to respond to what you're saying.
Hold on. I got to run real quickly. You guys can have almost all the time. This pay disparity I'm talking about, by the way, it's not 35 times. It's sometimes 100 times.
Yeah,
It's not because CEOs became like freaking more useful. It jacked up through the roof because they're better positioned to capture more of the surplus, and that's what's always happening here because they have the economic leverage to do it. I'm sure you've read the Economic Policy Institute reports that came back out just a couple of years ago. Most people that talk at economics like this level, by the way, I was an economics undergrad before I went on to get a doctorate on mathematics. Like I went to graduate school, it did education, that kind of shit, right? So I'm pretty decently versed in this kind of stuff too. CEOs were paid, it was almost 300 times. I forget the nickel and dime answers in the high 200s, but pretty damn much 300 times as much as typical workers. And CEO compensation goes way faster. It's like exponential, bro. Like it's not literally, but pretty damn close. And I think if you're going to be fair about the stuff and you want to ask a fair question, it's something along the lines of, did the globalization stuff we're talking about make the CEOs a little bit more important? And I think the answer is yeah, right? Did it make them 290 times more the worker important? That's pretty much of a leap, bro. That's where this stuff starts to, the math isn't mathing. You can pretend the math's mathing. You can pretend the math's mathing, but the math isn't mathing in that way. And you don't just go, oh, well. If you just go, oh, well, then the system is the problem. The system is the problem. You just do it. The attitude is kind of like, it's just how it is. There's nothing.
No, I'm just saying there are some simple market forces at play that,
Did workers become global, though? Did those?
In a way, yes, they have to compete globally. Yeah, they have, unfortunately. I lost my job at one point to global outsourcing. Yeah, it did.
I was going to say a lot of this can be blamed on McKinsey. They're the consulting firm. McKinsey deliberately worked, I forget how many years ago, 20, 25 years ago, in their consulting interactions or dealings, targeted CEO pay as the way for companies to stand out. So if everybody has access to the same technology, if everybody has access to the same logistics, everybody has access to the same financial structure, and all things being equal, the key pivotal piece is the CEO, the Steve Jobs, the Jeff Bezos, the people who stand out and above the others. So, Pro, I was just saying, a lot of this can be targeted on McKinsey. There was a consulting group, or is a consulting group, McKinsey, that about 20, 25 years ago started consulting with these larger companies, saying that, hey, if everybody operates under the same financial system, everybody operates under the same legal system and the logistics system and the technology system, right? Then the key pivot point, or the key point of leverage, is the CEO. That's the visionary pivot point that's going to elevate one company and accelerate their rise above the others. And so if that's the case, then you should pay him or her, a price that keeps them with your company and, leverages that.
I work for a competitor. There's actually an outgrowth of them called A.T. Kearney, which spun off from McKinsey in 1930.
Is that accurate? What I said, is that consistent with your?
Yeah, it was a focus. It wasn't the entire focus of what they were doing when they were speaking to boards, and there were a lot of other initiatives. I wouldn't say that was the majority, and I think it would take a detailed analysis to say, was this one initiative the reason why there was a huge growth, as Pro was saying, in CEO salary? A, I don't think we have the data. B, the complexity of it is just far too great to ascribe it to one variable. Yeah, they did do that kind of consulting, but at the end of the day, boards will do what's in the best interest of their company, and if they feel that they are overpaying, you will see downward pressure on that. Boards answer to shareholders, and if these CEOs are compressing profits, well, that's a problem. And just the ebbs and flow of how these things work together are very intricate, and it's I don't think it's enough to say, well, it's because of X.
Pro, can I just say, I put in the chat, to me, your awareness about the situation is the law, meaning that, your understanding of math and economics, what I'm trying to say is that the law actually gives us this equilibrium, and it's fucked up that money is what controls the politics and thus the business and the boardroom, everything. It's like money has this intelligence or weight, and the complaint could be that billionaire is unethical, immoral, unsavorable, obnoxious and horrible. And as you just heard, from my critics on this app, my mere existence is detestable to people, and it's really just because I record, probably. Maybe they don't have anything against me personally. They probably think I'm reprehensible because of my opinions. But when I hear people essentially doing hypnosis about past grievances that I have never been a part of, and neither have you nor the person telling me about the grievance, to me, it's like, I think maybe I'm more aware of like how to be happier or joyful or move on the face of the earth, and it's still just my opinion. Hello? We have CM and Sam. Welcome back. CM got upset with me yesterday. He had an emotional hissy fit, kind of like what I would describe like having a child, in your presence who has a temper tantrum. He's screaming, kick this MFer from the room, kick this mother effer. And, Sam left. I'm sure nobody wants to hear me. See, people want to be the star of their own show. Sam is that star. And, there are people who organize, and I would call them leaders, even if I don't agree with other opinions. If you organize a room and create a title and have a house, well, that's like being a gym class leader. Or, anyways, I don't know if Pro can hear me, but I got those DVDs. I just put them down by my DVD player, and really incredible DVDs like Fundamentals of Mathematics, and then it has all these lectures by professors. One of them was from University of Texas, and he's talking about basically applied mathematics and all these different situations where they used math to, probably determine the greatest outcome. And so that's my complaint about these maximalization profit ethicists who claim that that's the problem. Well, in a free society, when people try to optimize the situation, if they can legally and morally and ethically do it, guess what human behavior generally does? They do it. And, the craziest thing to me and the saddest thing to me is if you go to a casino, I consider it like a temple. People go there to basically have some type of faith experience. They don't understand the law of large math or basically basic statistics. And I cannot understand people's experience at a casino. I know they want the dopamine, but this, I don't know if you know Abby, the lawyer on here. I tell her, I'm like, you must hate Clubhouse because people have the casino dopamine experience, but they don't have to pay for it. And to me, that's, a fun experience and a fun revelation that the casino really is for suckers. I personally think the stock market in many ways is basically a casino for suckers, because I have done lots of experiments in the market. And if you get into day trading, it rapidly becomes like a dopamine experience. And you think you can outsmart the dopamine experience by day trading. But the problem is your whole life just becomes reading financial news and financial gossip and press. It's like it's its own thing. It's its own marketplace. But when it comes to the title of this room, working on how not to suck, join me in this pursuit. To me, no one's ever really sucked. There's just been like disagreeable people that you find annoying. But then basically, I think if you love yourself and you want the best for yourself, ultimately you treat everybody, even the disagreeable, horrible people, with respect, because anytime you give disrespect, it just comes back to you, So people try to fuck with you, but if you have a good disposition, character, personality, you can, overcome any objections in a way, because it basically comes down to, are you making sense? Is it logical? Are you persuasive and informative? And it's, basic public speaking. But when people crash out on me, they don't understand. I've told this to Pro that, I think I'm playing like the role of the fool in a king's court. And the fool goes around and trolls all the noblemen, all the noble ladies, all the inferior people in this type of caste kingdom system. And to me, people accuse me of being performative, but this is actually me. Everything I think and say is who I am. And that's what worries me about other people, is that what they're saying is in a way like who they are. And they're not really saying anything. They're complaining. And not only are they complaining, they're repeating leftist, woke, hypnosis history in order to essentially virtue signal and justify their position. But the thing is, if there's no applied action to what they're doing on this app, I think it's a big waste of time. And I do apply what I'm doing by actually running in politics and putting my face out there publicly, because, being a private person helps you with employment. But if I have to go and have a hiring manager, look me up on the internet, there's like an 80 to 99% chance that they'll say no, just based on the content. But they'll never actually listen to the content or actually try to experience, because a lot of these recordings that I do are 2 to 3 to 4 to 20. There's so much content. So it's like, how could you value judge me with a sample? And I think that's one of the problems with this app, is the samples are of such low quality and such small content of, terabytes, gigabytes, megabytes. It's a very slow information transfer thing. So the big takeaway from Clubhouse is the emotional response experience. That's really what Stoic philosophy and Taoism and all these therapeutic healing types of philosophical, religious, esoteric studies are dealing with is the emotional state. And I think the Bible is actually a book mostly about emotional intelligence, not intellectual intelligence, but emotional intelligence. I rest my case. I'm working on how not to suck. Join me in this pursuit.
Give me 1 second, guys.
That was comprehensive, John. What's up, CM?
So what's up?
And I'm trying to pick up my son. Actually, I gotta go to see my son's music recital, and then I gotta take him to basketball. That's what it's like being a parent, bro. Never stops.
You know, I was a high school photographer. I have no kids, but I like to make films. I mean, I would love to have kids and film, their joy and publish that. But part of me is that could take away from that person's experience, but maybe not. I mean, how do you feel about children essentially documenting their lives at a young age with the belief that they're going to do it their whole life or something?
He doesn't like it, but I've saved all his stuff for him, and he has it in a file, so he does like reviewing the stuff. But we don't publicly put him out there like that. Every once in a great while there'll be a little something, but for the most part, he's pretty much off the grid. For the most part, as much as you can be in 7th grade.
Yeah, I worked at Google YouTube, and our client was SC Johnson, who makes Ziploc. I was an account manager, and they were very concerned about their ad placement on controversial, potentially right-wing or controversial content that appears on YouTube. So they wanted a full audit of where all their advertisements were being displayed. And I'm going through all these YouTube accounts that I have never seen or heard of, but they're huge accounts, like 10 million, 60 million, followers, and they're making huge amounts of money filming their life as a family in a mansion and going out and doing things. And they create all these videos, and it's some of it is risque even, where the mom is walking in the living room on her knees and her big fat ass is up in the air. And the next thing you know, you see a Ziploc advertisement.
It exploded back maybe 10 years ago. Ryan's Toy World is a good example of one. I'm going to lose you in a second, and I'll be able to hear you guys in a while, but it'll be spotty. But yeah, if you look up Ryan's World, he launched his own toy line, I think when he was 9 years old in Walmart, and his mom and dad are in all the videos, and his sisters are now doing it. They're younger than him. And yeah, he's Disney World. I know Red Bar now.
Yeah, we got Scott in the audience. Scott had a room today called Let's Talk About MAGA. I recorded the whole thing in multiple recording studios. And I want to mention something about that room. Scott, welcome. But, YouTube, I record mostly on YouTube. And to me, YouTube Google's where the money's at, because that's where all the advertisers are. And other people say, oh, you should do Twitch and Kick. And I do TikTok, but I can't live stream on Instagram anymore. And Scott says he's a fan of mine. And Scott, I heard you say a lot of things today. I've always been a hardcore leftist, or I was an extreme hardcore leftist, but not so much anymore. I mean, Scott, how do you view bad ideas from people on this app? What are the priorities? Is it not about priorities? What's it all about? Hello?
Yeah, so I think on some level we have to have a sense of what the collective project is. And I don't know that we've got that. I don't know that we've, I like Pro a lot. I like you a lot. I mean, but I don't know that we've got a collective we anymore. And so, I go into the critical thinking forum, which I'm going to do in about 2 minutes. Because largely, I think that to me is a collective we for me. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the collective project is. I know that we're running out of money as a country. Some people think that's the problem. Some people don't. I mean, I think it's.
How do you run out of money, Scott, when you're at 40 trillion in debt? What AI says is that you lose core services when more of your tax revenue goes towards interest payments.
Right, yeah. I mean, we're at that point, right? But I think, but no one runs on that, right? I mean, so there's largely, there's two different answers to this, right? I mean, the Republican answer is just tax cuts and we'll cut spending, but they don't really cut spending. The Democratic answer is, we'll expand government services and that's going to increase tax revenue. And so which it does. I mean, there's some truth to that. It does, but we're done. I mean, this is $40 trillion. I mean, this is not. Nobody's been in this debt in world history. John, no one. And that's what we will ask the critical.
Yeah, but Scott, it's not a question of no one. It's really a question of it's a miracle that America is still alive and not impacted from 25 years of intense warfare overseas. We have a kingdom here which has not crumbled in the slightest. We have a cultural, social problem of really attention. We can't get people's attention to read a book. I think, Scott, I'm the last man who's ever read a book for today, at least, At least today I read a book for 3 minutes. That's more than 99.9999999% of the whole human.
Yeah, I was reading books every day. I went through a breakup about a month ago, and I was reading books every day.
One thing I've noticed about Clubhouse is you have as well,
Nietzsche,
I'm sure,
Nietzsche, but,
that's difficult with the way the technology is set up here. It's not like
they don't mind you in here.
I don't know, three of us on the three-ring hall on our phone.
No.
Pro, do you not mind, John?
No. I'm considered a potential problem to some people. But my point is that as soon as you mod somebody, the algorithm rewards you and moves you higher up in the news feed. So if you were actually interested in audience and networking, you would just mod everybody. And then if somebody is a problem, then you just kick them to the goo, And if it's a house, they can't boom it. If it's a public room, they can boom it. So people use me for content and I use them for content. And people who complain about me, I complain about them. I try to live a balanced lifestyle. And I feel that, my position is of great equanimity and balance and harmony and joy and strength and positivity and love and great aesthetic and intelligence. And that's why I'm actually very optimistic about the future, because I realize that the great mass of human population is completely just living in a somnambulance, just sleepwalking, completely unaware of their ignorance, their own effeminacy, and weakness, and, basically bad opinions, and, they don't see beauty, they only see ugliness, or they can't actually create anything beautiful, or have any fun or joy or experience magnificence and great thrills. I mean, I think we're living with a very depressed population personally. If you go to see psychiatrists, many of them don't even smile. They're just very upset themselves. So, what's the secret sauce for happiness? What's the magic recipe for success, abundance, strength, health, power? Hello?
Today to $4.56 a gallon, up more than $1.50 since the conflict erupted in late February. That's according to the AAA, which on a daily basis monitors The average
Yeah, I mean, I
cost
don't know.
of
I was just doing my
across the
thing, and
country.
you were getting all
The cost
upset.
of diesel, which is extremely significant because, of course, the trucking industry runs on diesel, jumped to $5.67.
I was talking about the benefits of.
Now that's compared to $3.54 a year ago. So it's threatening to drive up the price of countless goods delivered by truck and rail.
Well, just go ahead. Tell me right now what you were thinking then. Can you do it?
The president said this week that the United States is making great progress in its negotiations with Iran.
I said, can you tell me what you were thinking then, right now?
Makes pronouncements, but economists and energy experts predict that fuel costs are likely to be elevated for months to come, no matter what happens with regard to the negotiations. Because as the oil experts have said, and I've repeated this often because it's so descriptive, in times of duress such as this, oil prices shoot up like a rocket, but they fall like a feather. Boy, I think that's very descriptive, isn't it? So, there's a great story in the LA Times, which says that the gas prices are widening the wealth gap between wealthy and poor Americans. This is extremely significant. Here's what the LA Times story says. Lower-income Americans sharply reduced their gas consumption in the months following the start of the Iran war. Yet spiking prices still force them to spend more at the pump, worsening the economy's economic disparity. Higher-income households, meanwhile, did increase their spending on gas, but barely reduced their consumption because they could afford it. And this is according to a report from the Federal Reserve of New York. And middle-income households fell in between these two disparities. According to the Federal Reserve of New York, the gaps between how each group reacted were larger than in 2022 when a similar gas price shock occurred after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Higher-income households cut back more on their gas consumption 4 years ago than in March, while poor households likely benefited more from government stimulus programs in 2022, which we don't have this time. And by the way, according to this Federal Reserve report, wealthier households have seen significant increases in the value of their stock and real estate holdings since the start of the war. So while you and I are suffering, and those who are lower in the economic strata more so than those of us who are middle income, the wealthy people just continue to get wealthier. This doesn't affect them. They're Teflon when it comes to the war. And so the gap widens. This is extremely important. Why? Because we see what happens in nations when you don't have a strong middle class and there's a wide disparity between the very rich and the very poor and very little in between. And we, of course, if we are in any bit empathetic to the plight of people who are struggling economically, we certainly don't want to see them struggle more today than they did yesterday, but even worse tomorrow. So I want to get back to the economy and the U.S. debt in a moment. Even though the problems with the U.S. debt are not solely by any related to what's going on with the gas crisis, but it just adds to the stress on the economy. And I don't want to ignore that. So I'm going to expand the conversation to that in a minute. But before I do, I want to talk about airline prices. So this is from The Guardian. 2 million airline seats have been cut from this month's schedules as airlines redraw their operations because of soaring jet fuel prices due to the Middle East conflict. About 13,000 fewer flights will operate in May around the world after recent cancellations. That's according to data from the aviation analytics company Cirium. Cirium, Cirium, in case you're interested in looking it up. Now, to put it in context, it is true that that figure, while it sounds pretty large, and I think it is pretty large, represents less than 2% of global aviation capacity. But it comes as there are fears in the industry that the long-term supply of jet fuel, according to The Guardian, could cause further summer cancellations. And there are consolidations of routes going on right now in anticipation of this. And we're just getting into, hopefully, the summer travel season. So I mentioned the debt. There's a story in the New York Times today that I could not ignore as we talk about fuel prices. And again, in fairness, obviously this is a long-term problem, but it speaks to how our policymakers have blinders on. So here's the story in today's New York Times. The top of the story reads, the U.S. government learned last week that it may have reached an unfortunate milestone. The size of its debt surpassed the nation's total economic output. It was a striking imbalance, according to early estimates, one that the country has experienced only in rare circumstances, briefly during the pandemic and in the aftermath of World War II. But, the New York Times reports, the development barely seemed to register in the nation's capital, where few policymakers bothered to acknowledge the latest warning sign about the government's poor fiscal health. The root of the problem is well documented and widely known. U.S. debt has soared in recent years because of a mismatch between federal spending and tax revenue, one complicated by a rapidly aging population, which has driven up costs across the government. By the way, this was something that the president promised to address, both in his first term and in the current term. And we are easily fooled by the politicians who point fingers one at each other's party over this issue. Given the fact that both parties spend like drunken sailors, there is zero concerted effort that I could see on the Hill or in the executive branch to address this government spending issue, which my entire lifetime, at least since I have been old enough to be aware, has been a problem which never really gets addressed. Even with Doge, it didn't get addressed. And in fact, I think with the Doge cuts, in the aggregate, the cost of shutting down and then the cost of shutting down and restarting different programs that they surely knew would be forced by the courts to reopen, in the aggregate, from what I remember, some of the reporting, and I don't have this right in front of me, was more costly than if they'd done nothing at all. So, I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know whether this results in, all of this results in inflation, or a repression, or a depression, or whether we just tighten up our belts and adjust our lives and say this is our new reality, at least for the moment. I don't know. I'll tell you that I drive a conversion van, which I love, and I'm not going to give up driving my van because I camp out in my van, and it is my daily drive because I'm living alone. I don't need two vehicles, and I don't get but 17 miles to the gallon. And I don't do that much driving other than, to and from the train station, which isn't a long drive, except, of course, when I take the van out for my expeditions. But I feel, okay, I spend for this. That's fine. It's my vacation, and I want to spend the money that I've saved up to go and explore. And so I don't worry too much about it then. But now on a daily basis, sometimes it may be more convenient for me to drive most of the way to work rather than take the train. And it's like, well, why would I do that right now? Between the tolls and the parking and the increased gas prices, I've adjusted a little bit. And I bet you've adjusted a little bit too. So I want to hear what you all have to say about that. Folks in the audience, raise your hand. I know some people put their hands up and then took them down because I call you up one at a time now. So don't get frustrated. I will get to y'all. So today we'll start our discussion in the order in which I see folks, which begins with Marshall, followed by Scott.
I can't talk too much about gas prices, but debt to GDP ratio means the borrowing of the federal government is harder, which means borrowing as a regular person is harder. It also means that we're not going to be able to spend as much, that we will be forced to cut down entitlements. That's the government policy. Social Security, Medicare, disability, SSID, along with Social Security. There's one other Security basket. Those are the largest growing portions of U.S. spending aside from service to the debt. And so we will be forced to make austerity cuts within my lifetime. What I really get out of all of this is, and I don't mean this in an offensive fashion, I mean in kind of a playful fashion, but a truthful fashion. Your generation and the next generation screwed my generation 10 ways from Sunday by not being able to control how much we spend. And it is as somebody who's 35 and a millennial, it's a little hard.
Oh, no question. Your assessment is accurate because these politicians, they want to kick the can down the road and get through their tenure without having to address these problems. It'll be the next Congress and the next Congress or the next administration and the next administration's problem. Sooner or later, the chickens come home to roost, as the saying goes. Did I get that right? I'm not so sure. But at any rate, you're absolutely right. And I don't understand.
It's just like my generation just looks at kinds of social services the next generation and generation else had access to.
The problem is everybody has their vested interest.
Yeah, right here.
When it comes
for a shirt.
Yeah, everybody has their vested interest when it comes to programs they don't want cut.
Coming.
What's that? Marshall, we're losing you again. Marshall,
I'm helping prepare for an event for the Congresswoman, so I gotta fix something.
All right. Yeah, you're breaking up. You're in and out, in and out, in and out. So, but anyway, the point is, Marshall is exactly right. Nobody wants their program cut. By the way, to that point, the board that the president appointed to oversee FEMA today recommended cutting the FEMA budget in half. In half. Now, maybe that's necessary based on our discussion today, but when they talk about cutting FEMA, a lot of people look at well, we've been having serious weather events lately. We're going through a cycle, whatever the reason. I'm not going to get into the argument of the cause, whether it's a natural cycle or whether it's a man-made type of a situation. I don't know. That's not today's discussion. But we know that the need for emergency management assistance from the U.S. government is greater now than ever. Just last night or this morning, both overnight, more than 500 homes were significantly damaged in Mississippi by a rash of tornadoes. I don't know, maybe we could say it's not the federal government's responsibility to address these issues when whole communities get wiped out by floods and tornadoes and hurricanes. It's your fault for not having insurance and in terms of immediate recovery efforts. Well, the church groups can come in and take care of that. We don't need FEMA. Some people might argue that. But I suspect that a lot of people hear this news with a degree of disdain. So where do we make the cuts in order to address the debt situation? But the more immediate problem, of course, is the cost of fuel and how it drives up costs and how we have to adjust our lives, our consumption. By the way, I saw a story also the other day. Again, I don't have this one in front of me, but I'm just recalling it now as I speak about restaurants having to lay off staff and restaurants that are actually closing. They can't afford to operate in the manner in which they operated before because people aren't going to the restaurants in the manner they did before this war because they don't have the discretionary income for a night out, give mom the day off, she doesn't have to cook. Or date night, even. I don't know. But that's what the story said. And I gotta believe that it's accurate because it just makes sense that it would be. Thank you, Marshall. We'll go to Scott, followed by Steve. Good time to put your hand up, folks. Scott.
Yeah, I think it's not. I'm with Marshall on this to some point. I think so. Part of it is the fuel prices, right? Part of it is the cost of entitlements. Part of it is the inflation. I think the tipping point is there's just too many pressure points, right? I think that largely most people are feeling squeezed, and you know, if you're like me, I live in Philadelphia. I don't drive. I mean, I just take public transportation most places. But most people, even if you don't have a car, you just feel the squeeze. You go into a convenience store and you see what a burrito costs or what Doritos cost, and yeah, you're being squeezed. And I think that's the problem. Is that the squeeze? It's feeling the pinchers from all directions. And so I think that's the problem, Gary. And I don't know how we get out of it. I mean, I don't know. I think fuel costs are an issue. The debt is an issue. I mean, I think one of the things that Biden did, which I think wasn't necessarily the worst move in the world, but Biden was looking down the nose at a recession, and he didn't want it on his watch. And so he pumped $6 trillion into the economy, which, maybe it was the healthier move. I don't know. But what does that do? I mean, you put a lot more money in the economy chasing the same amount of goods. It raises prices. So, I think people are feeling squeezed. And I don't know how you get out of the feeling of the squeeze, but I think that's the issue. And I don't know that collectively we have the kind of collective sensibility to get out of the situation. I think mostly the politicians we're hiring or electing are largely that's their job. They want to get elected and reelected, and so I don't know. I think we're in big trouble.
Well, you say taking public transportation. Transportation costs are rising too. I just noted that the PATH train, which links New Jersey with New York City, the Port Authority, the PATH train, it's gone up in price. Everything's going up in price. And obviously, if the gasoline and diesel prices are rising, the cost of goods are going up. I did my grocery shopping this morning on the way home from work, and there were things that I had intended to purchase. And I looked at the cost and I said, you gotta be kidding me. And there were things that I was going to put in my basket that I decided not to, just on the principle of, I'm not going to spend that much money for that item. And here's another thing that I noticed today, and it's not like they're bare shelves or anything like that, but I wanted to buy a certain product, and none to be found in the store. So I don't know. And also, here's something I noticed this time and the last time. I buy bottled water. I buy spring water because I like using spring water in my cooking and my preparing my beverages and so forth. I don't like the type of water that happens to come out of the tap here where I live. It's a little too harsh. So, I'll buy a gallon of water. Usually, it used to be for 80 or 90 cents a gallon. It's now $1.50 a gallon. But I'll do that. Even when it comes to that, I noticed last time I go every couple weeks and stock up. So 2 weeks ago, and then again this morning, there were like empty shelves. I mean, they weren't out of spring water, but there was a shortage of spring water and no locks. I had the taste I wanted this morning after I got off the train. I wanted to come home and I wanted bagels and cream cheese and lox, which I know is very expensive now, but I was just in the mood to treat myself. No lox in the store. Sorry, guy, we don't have them in stock today. So it's starting to affect things. And when it affects my palate negatively, Scott, that's not a good thing. Puts Gary in a bad mood. You ever get that when you put it in your mind, this is what I crave today, and you go on a search and then you can't find it? Puts you in a bad mood.
Yeah, no. Look, I think that's going to be a lot of the country, right? I mean, I think, again, I don't drive because I live in the city, but I think a lot of most Americans do. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think most Americans, because we're in a car culture, we're not a sort of, and even with public transit and all that stuff, but I mean, that's a more shared distributive effect. But that's not our culture. We're in a car culture. And I think most Americans are going to be angry every day pulling up to the pump and just resenting the fact that they have to pay this much every day. And so, look, it's not good. I don't know that it will be a tipping point, though, because I think, I don't know. I mean, what is the tipping point there? I mean, is it going to throw us into chaos? I don't think so. I think largely we'll stay in a sort of inflationary economic situation where prices continue to go through the roof, where we play our partisan games, right? And that's what we do. I mean, what my party is gonna definitely win the midterms, and what will we do? we'll investigate the administration, we'll have hearings, all this stuff. But nobody's going to problem solve until the thing collapses, because that's not, we don't have politicians that are problem solvers or creative. So it's just going to, we will just do management. And so, I mean, that will be, I don't think it's going to get better until it gets worse.
Thank you for that, Scott. I don't know whether there will be pitchforks and lanterns lit, torches lit because of all this. But there might be a tipping point where people just, they're not willing to take it anymore. And I don't know how they would express that. But the midterms are coming up. Thank you, Scott. We'll go to Steve, followed by Jay.
Hey, Gary, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm having a nice, you probably heard the beep, beep, beep of the microwave. So I'm making up for my lack of locks with a nice salmon dinner while I host our gathering today.
That sounds good, but I'm not a salmon lover. But to the point, I think the two things you're describing, Gary, one is event-driven, the oil price. The second is a structural issue, which the event-driven can bleed into the structural temporarily, but it's not the long-term issue here. And I think it was the early 80s when we started offshoring all our manufacturing, and we went to a service-based economy. And your town actually is a perfect example of what could have contributed to this. The workforce that's in Detroit right now versus, say, the late 60s, early 70s, and the kind of money that those people that worked in the factories in Detroit making automobiles is going to be extracting from Social Security and from Medicare and Medicaid is going to be disproportionate in a ratio kind of way to the type of money that's being put. They have not going to generate the same income factory worker in the late 60s or early 70s was generating to the federal government. And here's something else too that just amazes me. When this whole thing first started, me and my wife was having a conversation, and I told her, and this is really true, you cannot become wealthy as a country without making something. You have to have a manufacturing base to produce wealth. Look at what happened in China when they captured all of our manufacturing and the rise of their economy. We've been going in this direction for a long time, and Marshall talking about, well, your generation has got my generation. Well, in a sense it did, but the people inside that generation didn't offshore all these manufacturing jobs over to China. And this is what is disconcerting to me, is when Trump talks about trying to reinvigorate the manufacturing base inside the United States through different pressure mechanisms, where people can start finding a better job than, say, working at Walmart and having to get food stamps to live. How much do you think that's going to supply a structural issue in the deficit? Not much, because they're not going to be putting in as much, and they're going to be extracting resources to feed themselves. This is a structural issue that's been going on for a long, long time. And what we've done, we've been living off of a credit card, and payday's coming. And here's what's just totally blows my mind. Within the federal government, there has to be a lot of waste and fraud. And when we had this Doge thing, maybe these guys didn't do it correctly. But the idea, and this isn't, you look at the highlighted issues like what we see in Minneapolis. That's just a symptom of a much broader problem. You can probably go into the Defense Department and the budget they have and the contractors they have. Everyone's heard about the $300 hammer. Well, when you get in these kind of shapes, you got to go through these systems. You got to root out the waste and abuse to where you really find out what the true structural problem is. You know, how big is it? Well, you're not going to know until you get that thing lean and mean. So I think what we're talking about today, as soon as the Strait of Hormuz is opened up and ships starts flowing again, and we see equilibrium in the oil supply, and the futures traders aren't so paranoid about what's going to happen tomorrow in the Middle East, you'll see this oil price thing bounce back real quick. The other issue, though, and it's going to take a willingness to tell the people the truth. If you don't have manufacturing in the United States and you think people working at these service jobs is going to produce the type of income to the federal government that it takes to fund this stuff, you're living in a delusional fantasy. So I don't know how this isn't obvious to everyone. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you covered a couple of things. Here's what I think about us knowing about the problem with regard to government spending, because I don't know that the price of oil is going to fall very quickly, as you suggest. I hope you're right, and that the analysts that I quoted earlier are wrong. And I'm putting my money on you because that's what I want. I want it to fall quickly. But you talked about the government waste and how we've known about this all along. And I'm old enough to remember, and I don't know whether you are, William Proxmire. He was a Democratic senator from Wisconsin. And every month he issued his Golden Fleece Award. He did this from 1975 to 1988. Right. So he did it for a long time. Every month he brought examples of, you mentioned the expensive hammers, that kind of thing. Right. Ridiculous or ironic, wasteful government spending. Yeah. And he targeted projects he considered wasteful. And, for example, here was one that he did. The National Science Foundation. Your tax dollars were used, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have a National Science Foundation. Right. But your tax dollars were used, Proxmire told us, to fund a study on why people fall in love. That was the first Golden Fleece city. You know? Right. Why do people fall? Song that will answer your question for you a lot cheaper. Anyway, right. The point is, we know about these wasteful spendings, and we laugh about them, or we claim that we're going to do something about it, but nobody does anything. I think the president tried with Doge, but I think it was not a very smooth way of doing it. And they went crazy. They can do anything that they want, and so that was a real big miscalculation. I think in terms of form, it might have sent a message, but in terms of substance, it did not.
Yeah, the idea was correct. The execution was just wrong. But when we talk about structural issues like this, until you really know how much fat is on something, you can't do a true analytical evaluation of the problem you're dealing with. And what kills me, and I think it goes both ways, because I think there's people that benefit from different things, like in the Defense Department. I could only imagine how much, waste is floating around there. And then in entitlements, you hear these stories all the time of people renting these office spaces. No one's there. So I think there's got to be and Gary, I got to tell you, as someone that's dealt with some budgetary issues, this is partly our fault too, as Americans, because one of the hardest things that you'll see is when you talk to people about budgetary constraints, they look at you like, well, why can't we? Well, why can't we is because this is not monopoly money, and these same accounting principles and same business principles that run a company run a government. You got to have some financial clarity to what you're doing. And people will get involved in government projects, and it's like I know what is, because there's no accountability to failure. That's why these government programs get out of control, because, like, I used to run a small trucking company. If I made bad decisions, I would go out of business. If you're in government and you make bad decisions, you just tax people more. You never have to feel the pain of your decision making. And until we get something like that going, we're in bad shape. But I think one is an event and one is structural. I'll leave it there.
So it's not as if there aren't organizations within government whose job it is to watchdog all of this. There are. There are more than 70 federal inspectors general, although Trump, which I don't understand it, given that he wanted to cut all this wasteful spending, he got rid of a bunch of inspectors general. But across all the major federal agencies, each of them has a inspector general, and there's the Government Accountability Office, which is the primary watchdog. Each audit federal spending, they identify waste, they root out fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. Great. But as you point out correctly, they have no authority to order changes. They just report them. And apparently, in spite of the fact that this administration wanted to cut the federal spending, with this